All right, welcome everyone. Excited to have two world-class operators here today to discuss how to set up your supply chain to go from a new product to launch. We have Ben Christensen, who is the VP of Operations at Sim Fishing, and Justin Seidenfeld, who's the CEO of Doris Dev and also the founder of Canopy. Thank you, Ben and Justin. Ben, I'll turn it over to you to go through your background.
Thanks, Rodney. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope that this is a good use of your time. I am here in Bozeman, Montana with Sim's Fishing Products. We are a technical apparel and equipment brand focused on fishing. We have a supply chain that is pretty diverse. We produce a fair bit of our product downstairs here at our headquarters. We own a cut and sew Gore-Tex certified outerwear factory. And then we produce a lot of our product through contract manufacturers across Asia and the Americas. I've been here at Sims for 9 years, done a variety of different things, starting on the financial planning side and then sort of gradually evolving to the role that I'm currently in. Prior to Sims, I spent 4 years in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto working for a venture capital firm. Prior to that, I spent 4 years in Beijing working in commercial real estate. My time in China happened because I studied Mandarin Chinese and East Asian studies in high school and college, and so that led me to China. And that experience, those language skills continue to be really valuable for me in my role here today. So we're looking forward to the conversation, and I'll hand it off to Justin.
Thanks, Ben. Hey guys, I am Justin Seidenfeld. I'm the founder and CEO of Doris Dev. Super excited to be here to chat all things new product and supply chain. A bit of background on Doris Dev first is we are a product development company based in New York with an office in Hong Kong. I am normally based in New York, currently in Austin, Texas at the moment. But Doris Dev essentially helps companies go from concept through shipping of physical product across all different product brands and verticals. We've got muscle to help support industrial design, engineering, sourcing, supply chain setup, supply chain management, and then fulfillment operations on the back end, which we do as a service partner for a number of brands across all different categories, from in-home durables to connected hardware to packaging and everything in between. As mentioned, we've got an office in New York, we've got an office in Hong Kong. I started the business about 5 years ago, and it's evolved into what it is today over the last 5 years in a pretty interesting way. Before Doris Dev, just for some context, the roots of Doris Dev came from a company called Quirky, which was a VC-backed tech-enabled product development platform and invention company based in New York. I mentioned that because a lot of the things that we're doing at Doris Dev came out of the product and ops infrastructure that was set up at Quirky. And during my time at Quirky, I moved out to Hong Kong to set up our manufacturing and sourcing operations in Asia. So spent 2 years on the ground setting up production lines at facilities all over Asia. And then one last piece is, as a service partner in the product, consumer product brands ecosystem, we've worked on a lot of different things. And through that process, we incubated and launched our own product brand last year called Canopy. So also wear the hat of being a brand owner as well. And Canopy is a humidifier that provides functional benefits for healthy skin. So it's positioned as a beauty wellness product for the home, and really excited to have launched our own product that's been doing really well over the last 6 months.
Thank you both. We also didn't plan this, but you both lived in China for many years, so I'm sure some of your perspective here in these questions will come from that. Ben, the first question, obviously finding suppliers that support your business is incredibly important, not just for today, but the future. How did COVID impact this? What are you doing differently here?
Well, it's hard to go out and identify and vet new suppliers right now. For me, it's always been critical that I actually see the production facilities myself, that I meet with the people that are running the operation in person. And that's been extremely challenging. Fortunately, coming into COVID, we had a stable supply chain that we'd really been working on over years. I've been responsible for sourcing here at Sims now for about 5 years. So we made a lot of moves early on when I took over these responsibilities, and we came into this crisis in a pretty good position. Having said that, we did commence operations with new suppliers over the last 12 months. Fortunately, we had gotten to know them before. And, if there's a takeaway from that, it's just kind of always be networking, always be thinking about new opportunities, new relationships, because ultimately there isn't going to be a great fit in most cases. And so you really have to cast a broad net, and you never know when circumstances might change such that a fit emerges. And in our case, that did happen over the last 6 months. And so, I think, that's sort of anecdotal, but COVID has been challenging for sure in terms of identifying and establishing new partnerships.
Got it. And Justin, obviously, Quirky, Product Labs, Doris Dev, this is a big part of your business. How do you look at it? How have things changed with COVID?
Yeah, I think, specific for our business, last year was, especially the first half of last year, kind of dealing with the front lines was really tough. The uncertainty of what was going on and what was going to happen basically caused a lot of things to either go into turmoil or kind of get put into a standstill. So that was really challenging to kind of navigate through that. A lot of the work that got done was leaning on partnerships and making sure that we were shoring up really strong partnerships together, both on the brand side and on the manufacturing side where possible. I think, that meant we added some folks on the ground in mainland China who could help support, be the eyes and the ears for some of the program needs through the course of last year. That was really valuable. And then in other situations, it was, kind of lifting our heads up and seeing what we could do, or exploring alternative options of, maybe moving supply chains somewhere where it could be, a little bit more stable, forward looking, and things like that. So it was, I think for us, it was really interesting because it just, the uncertainty and everything threw everything for a loop. And it was trying to figure out how we could get our bearings and kind of navigate the uncertainty together with partnerships where possible.
Yeah. I'm going to build on this for a minute. You mentioned your team in China. How important is it for you to have that team there?
Yeah, for us, it's basically, it's a non-starter in how important it is and the value that it adds. I think, everybody, on this call would recognize that there's so many unknowns as you go through kind of new product introduction and supply chain setup, or ongoing supply chain management, where you need to kind of have certainty as to what's going on. And sometimes really the only way to do that is by having somebody that you can trust as the kind of the boots on the ground, the eyes and the ears for the situation. So for us, it's a really important part of our business. That's obviously, part of the value prop that we've brought to bear with Doris Dev through our Hong Kong office. And then as we've grown and evolved, putting, some folks on the ground in China and Taiwan and other, territories and locations where we're actually having production. But yeah, it would be a non-starter, I would say, for how you're thinking about new product introduction and supply chain setup for scale.
Got it. And Justin, continuing this, you've clearly worked with some of the coolest brands: Magic Spoon, Gravity Blanket, by humankind. I could keep on going, and I'm sure you could add to the list. And I'm sure they come to you with all different variations of what they want to make. For you, what's the first thing to get that idea produced?
Yeah, it's what's probably the most fun for us at Doris Dev is just the varied nature of all the different prompts and briefs that we see for new product. I think we're most excited about like working on a lot of different types of things and different things across different verticals and manufacturing processes and design challenges and whatnot. So I think that's what, kind of motivates us and keeps us going. But I think kind of a shared commonality of the approach or what's important out of the get-go is to just make sure that you have a clear vision for what you want to make. I think sometimes that can get lost in any design or development process, which is at the onset of a project, you should really be creating guardrails and very well-defined product requirements for what the outcome should be, because that's going to act as essentially a kind of your guardrails to streamline to that point B, because through the process there's going to be issues and problems and things that you need to kind of overcome. And as long as you have a distilled, shortlisted, itemized list of these are the requirements and this is what we need to make, you at least have kind of a map and an aligned, plan of attack of how you need to get there. So that's something that we always want to kind of tee up at the onset of every project, is making sure that you create a very clear product requirements document from features, marketing claims, all the way through pricing. What are you going to sell this product? What is the cost? Because that's going to have implications on what you can design in or can't be designed in. So all of that is really, really important at the onset of any new product brief.
Would you, to build upon this, would you want 2Ds, 3Ds, specs, and tolerances, or would you be fine even without that at the onset?
I think that you definitely need those through the design and development process, but sometimes you don't know, you may not know the answer to that at the onset. So it could be basically bubbling that up as something that needs to be figured out through the design and development process. Or, what we typically would do for a lot of programs is kind of survey the landscape for comp products and say, here's what this other product, it might not be a carbon copy of what we want to make, but it has a bunch of the attributes, or it hits on some points of the product intent that we want to pull, we want to draw from, and look at comp products and use those as kind of reference for the functional or qualitative requirements that you want to instill into your product. And I think that's a really helpful place to start, because it also helps point at something that is achievable versus creating a product spec that might not be you might not be able to achieve out of the gate.
Yeah, I couldn't echo that enough, how incredibly important that is. Let's build upon this a little bit. New product introduction process, obviously incredibly important. What are the biggest hurdles that you see and things that brands need to overcome during that process?
Yeah, I think a bit of kind of like re-echoing from my last point is that really having a clear vision of what needs to get made and built, and really thinking through all of the aspects as you can as early on, that can be distilled and captured into a product requirements document, because that's going to help inform a lot of the decisions through the design and development phase of work. And it's also going to help inform what resourcing plan needs to get put into place for that work, and who we should be thinking about to engage for a manufacturing or a supply chain partner perspective. It all really boils back to trying to distill this like as clear of a vision for what the output is going to be as early on in the process as you can. And I think that's something that again, we get approached by a lot of different brands across verticals that want to make these really cool things or want to make these things, but they don't know what they are. And the first exercise that we'll go through with them is to make sure that we're running through a list of prompts or inputs regarding this product vision so that we understand and set the right expectations around what it is that we're, going to be making.
Ben, I'm going to build on this with you, just, my own curiosity. Fishing, people love it. They're addicted to fishing. How are you looking at, like, for you, like launching new products in that category for customers?
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities to what Justin said. In technical product, where we have a lot of history and a lot of strength, we really want to stay focused on a specific solution that we're solving for the angler. And that has to be part of the product brief from the very beginning. That product brief needs to be a sort of living, breathing document that evolves through the process as your thinking changes and you kind of get deeper into the actual product itself. Sometimes I think we innovate because we get excited about something that's bright and shiny. And at the end of the day, maybe we're not solving a problem for somebody. It's super critical that we know what that problem is, that we're focused on a solution, and that we stay focused on that. When we're thinking about non-technical product, more what we call off-water or lifestyle product, we focus less on a functional problem and we focus more on a consumer, a muse. Who is this person that we're trying to create this for? And that is our guiding light. So we take kind of a two-pronged approach based off of the type of product. But again, it is knowing what you're intending to do out of the gate and staying focused on that intention throughout the process.
Yeah, I like the aspect of focusing on the customer first. A lot of people do it in reverse, and I tend to think you fail if you don't do that. Alibaba, obviously a major sourcing tool, if you will, for a lot of companies. I hear it all the time. Should, I use this supplier I found on Alibaba, or will the supplier actually do what they say? Number one, what are your thoughts on Alibaba? And number two, what other options are there if you're going to actually create something? And I'll start with you, Justin. I know you have some thoughts here.
Yeah, I think Alibaba is an interesting one. It is there is value in the platform as long as you approach it with the right perspective. I think that you just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, that you don't really know what you're going to get if you solely rely on the platform. So I would say that it is part of the toolkit for our sourcing team to leverage, but it's a part that gets used with guarded, a guarded perspective, and one that requires ample validation if that is going to be the path that we set ourselves on. Otherwise, we definitely it's part of the toolkit, but we like using a wide range of tools when it comes to sourcing. So obviously, Anvyl has been incredibly helpful for building out that network and making sure that we're using and leaning into curated and vetted manufacturing partners. We also really rely on kind of the relationships that we have established and have had for many years. A lot of the partnerships, manufacturing partnerships that we have that we use today are ones that came out of relationships that I formed when I was on the ground in Asia 8 or 9 years ago. So we've had these long-standing relationships over the course of that time, and asking them for reference to vendors and ancillary categories is a great place, is a great tool that we also use. So I think the one degree of removed reference is really valuable in kind of the sourcing sphere.
Ben, Alibaba and other options. What's your take here?
It's not generally a tool that's been valuable for us. I have worked with suppliers that also market through Alibaba. So, finding the needle in the haystack, perhaps I could have found these suppliers that way, but it hasn't been a strategy for Sims. What has worked for us is, again, it's a version of what Justin said. It's networking with your best trusted suppliers, getting introductions to other suppliers that are non-competitive for them. I also look a lot at import records. I think about other brands that are making exceptional product, and perhaps product that's comparable to product that we intend to make. And I do use those import records just to kind of get leads and get pointed in one direction or another. One of the things that's happening in our industry, and it's happening broadly, I think, in consumer goods, is that, supply chain details used to be a trade secret, and now there's a call for transparency. And in our space, Patagonia is a leader. You go to the Patagonia website, scroll down on a product page, tells you exactly where that product was made. I don't necessarily use that extensively, but it's very interesting just to get a sense for where products are being made. It can be very directional in terms of helping us focus our efforts.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'll just pull in like kind of my past life. When I was at Apple, we released all of our suppliers globally. You can search Apple suppliers and it's released, but it didn't matter if it was Apple or Harry's. It's really hard to use Alibaba because you can't trust a few things. You can't trust if that's really who it is that you're actually working with. A lot of times it's third parties, and those third parties are not directly in the factory, and or maybe they haven't been in the factory. So going there and actually seeing with your eyes and walking the floor, everything from incoming to outgoing warehouse is important. It helps you with cost, it helps you with quality, it helps you just to scale your business. And if you don't do that, it's challenging. And especially with, direct to consumer product companies, the quality aspect of your business is everything. And the last thing you would want to do is have bad quality leave the factory. Alibaba, you don't control that. And that's a big red flag and concern. There's actually a question here from Catherine, which I think builds upon this. Obviously, Alibaba is a monster in China. They are heavily there. Catherine asked a question around moving to the US. Both of you obviously operate in China, you have suppliers in China. Do you look at moving supply chains to the US is a question, and I'll build upon this. And if not, do you see other countries potentially that you're looking at for your product categories or others? Thank you, Catherine. Great question.
Take a first crack at that. We have a really extensive commitment to US manufacturing, not only because of the facility that's right downstairs where I'm sitting right now, but also just contract manufacturing relationships locally as well as in other parts of the United States. We've actually had success reshoring product back to the United States, back to our facility here in Bozeman. But we've had to get pretty creative about how we do that. There are certain types of manufacturing that are just borderline impossible in the United States, either because the skill doesn't exist or the cost of that labor is so significant that we simply could not build a business model around it. But there are other opportunities where the U.S. I think has a lot of capacity, a lot of potential. What we're very focused on in our own facility and with other facilities is identifying those components that we can do well, investing a lot in technology, investing a lot in automation, and creating job opportunities that are focused on individuals with the capacity to do a lot of different things in a manufacturing environment. Really just kind of fueling the flexibility and the responsiveness that can make US manufacturing particularly attractive.
Hey, Ben, I have a question. What was you mentioned a program you reshored on the US. What kind of product and manufacturing processes was that for?
It's one of our fishing wader styles. It is not our lowest price point wader, but it's the second lowest price point wader. The product was launched and built in China. And we identified that the specific process that a manufacturer uses to attach the waterproof breathable upper of a wader to a neoprene foot, it is really difficult. And the easiest way to do it involves a lot of liquid adhesive, which is challenging from a workplace safety environment. And we worked with professors here at Montana State University to develop a proprietary technology that does it quickly, effectively, with no liquid adhesive. So we took that product that was made in China, we broke it into subcomponents. We manufacture those subcomponents in different factories around the world. We bring those pieces all together here in Bozeman. We do the secret sauce. We run all of our quality protocol, package it up, and ship it out. So it's not a true made in the USA product. It is technically assembled in the United States from imported components. You know, transparency around supply chain is important. That's why I'm kind of putting that all out there. At the end of the day, we think it leads to a much better product, and it's proven to be cost effective.
That's really cool. How long was that the innovation cycle or that development cycle on that new technology? Was that something that had been in the works for years, or was that kind of responsive to what was going on last year and it was a quick thing?
It was in the works for years. It started out as a capstone project for a engineering master's program at the university. They planted the seed, and that was happening in parallel with me realizing that factories that specialize in making waders are kind of jacks of all trades, but they're not really great at any one thing. And we have outerwear factories that we work with that make taped waterproof breathable garments all day long, very, very well. And so it just kind of got me thinking, and the two pieces just came together somewhat serendipitously. But the investment in the automation and the technology was ongoing just because it has broad benefit for all of our manufacturing activity here.
Very cool. And I guess just to switch gears on that, or to answer the question on our end, we're dealing predominantly with startups, so pre-revenue brands or early stage brands to get their supply chain set up and help support them to scale. We last year, as mentioned, kind of the wrench got thrown in mid-year, and for us it was trying to figure out how to navigate that. And a lot of the prompts were, hey, should we start looking at reshoring supply chains where possible? We don't. And ultimately, kind of, we went through the exercise of looking into, where that could be done, and across a lot of different consumer verticals. And it was really challenging from a basically a financial perspective to make it work for these startups and at the scales in which they're producing goods. The minimum order quantity commitments or the setup costs associated with getting new tooling or new equipment was just astronomical, and something that a lot of these early stage companies wouldn't be able to absorb or digest. So we weren't able to onshore programs here. What we were able to do, though, was move some of the programs that were in mainland China into some ancillary places. So we actually found some success moving some durable hardline programs to Taiwan, and then some soft goods programs out of mainland China to Southeast Asia. But for the most part, for programs that have specialized processes or materials where the infrastructure is just really mature and robust in mainland China, the numbers really just don't make sense or are really challenging for these early stage upstarts to even consider moving. And so through the process, we've had to what I would call kind of invest in shoring up relationships with partners in the mainland to make it work, and then getting ahead of planning. So making sure that we were adding a ton of buffer time and buffer budgeted, buffer budget to cover some of the unknowns and uncertainties with, supply chain delays and issues in mainland China through the course of the last few months.
Yeah, I think just to build upon that, I don't think people realize like the trade-off between speed and cost. China just has a stranglehold on many manufacturing steps because they can do it faster and for less money, because they have the infrastructure built out, they have the factories built out, they have the expertise built out. And it's really hard to rip that out and just put that in other countries because there's so much you have to do for that to happen. And I'm not saying every single industry, obviously, health and beauty, you can do, we have the world's best CMs in the US, but depending on what industry you're in, it's really, really hard to beat the speed that you could do in China and the cost you can do in China or Asia proper in general. So it's tough. And Catherine, I don't know if that answers your question, but it depends on the category, I would say, and a bunch of other factors. Apple has one major product line in Austin, actually, just somewhere you're at. And the only reason it's there, it's because it's fully automated line without anybody touching any of the product. If not, you're not going to do that. You're not going to bring it into the US. So that's even for tech. But that's always a good one. And I think it's top of mind with what happened in China. But even with China with COVID, they shut down for roughly 1 to 2 months, and then they came back up quickly. So that turnaround was extremely high. And I'm sure there was a ripple effect globally from them being shut down, but they were back up. So even with COVID, they were able to continue to operate. So Ben, switching gears a little bit, moving to the world of scale. What do you need to know when you're at scale? What are the most important things for a brand, for an operator?
Well, I think you have to define a high-level strategy for your supply chain that helps to guide some of the more detailed tactical decisions that you have to make. And, for us here at Sims, and this is true, I think, for all supply chains to a certain extent, we're always thinking about geopolitical risk, instability in different countries. I think we've all seen what's happening in Myanmar right now. There was an enormous amount of apparel manufacturing in Myanmar that's been incredibly disruptive. And obviously, first and foremost, I think just a tragedy for the people that live there. So geopolitical risk is something you have to take into account. And then finding that balance between diversification and consolidation. So diversification in terms of not having too many eggs in any one basket, whether it's with a single partner or in a single geography, but yet consolidated such that your business relationships are meaningful. You're doing enough business with each individual vendor that you're getting priority and you're getting the attention that you need. The other big piece of it is capabilities. Do you have a supply chain that has the requisite capabilities to support your product strategy? Ideally, if your business is moving into new categories, you have long enough visibility that you can go out and go through a thorough due diligence process and in finding the right supplier to add those capabilities. And then the last one I think about is just redundancy in capabilities. Do you have multiple vendors that can do the same thing? Because you're constantly dealing with fires in the supply chain. If you have to make a really quick move, do you have a vendor that's currently active that could take that product and run with it? Sims is at an interesting point where our supply chain has scaled to the point where it's gotten us where we are today. But I worry about its ability to support us 3 years from now. And so I'm doing things today to ensure that we have the supply chain to support where Sims is going to be in 2025. And that's all about identifying constraints, bottlenecks that are emerging and just trying to address those now. Because it's very hard to be thoughtful and strategic in a supply chain when you're being reactionary. It gets forced upon you, but I think proactivity and kind of high-level strategic guidance is very beneficial.
Mike Corbo, he's the chief supply chain officer at Colgate, and he talks about this a lot. And he echoes kind of the things you were saying, where he talks about you have contingency plans and you constantly test those plans. So you don't wait for these things to happen. And when things got shut down in China, he actually moved operations in other countries. When other countries like the US, things started shutting down, he moved it back to China. And he was able to do that quickly just because that's what they do yearly. They figure out issues and they try to test those issues in their supply chain. So it was what you're doing, it sounds very similar to what Colgate does. And obviously Colgate's a global player in their category.
The only thing I'd add, Rodney, is just maintaining a commitment to long-term partnerships throughout all this. That has been the most critical thing for us during the COVID crisis, is having long-term trusted relationships and actually using the crisis as an opportunity to cement those partnerships.
Yep.
We didn't cancel any purchase orders. We stuck by our suppliers and we let them know that we were doing that. We wanted to make sure we got credit for it as well, so having partners that are willing to work with you as you navigate is critical, and having priority because of the quality of the relationship is critical.
Anybody attending, just if you have any questions, please put them in the chat window. We only have a couple more, so we want to make sure we address or answer anything you have. Great questions so far. I'd love to be able to answer some more. Pretty hot topic here for a lot of people, not just Alibaba, but do you go factory direct, agencies, broker, some kind of partner? Justin, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I think obviously a very hot topic for us. We believe that it's important to facilitate the right relationship with your manufacturing partners out of the gate. And obviously as a service partner, we come in to help with that piece, right? So finding, identifying, engaging, and setting up a relationship for long-term success. What we don't do is insert ourselves in the middle, like a trading company or an agent or a broker. And I think that's, historically, that's how a lot of companies operate, or a lot of sourcing has been done, whereby there is this middleman inserting themselves as the agent or the trading company that acts as your manufacturer. But I think that ultimately will create a lot of problems down the road. And, I've seen that sitting on that side of the table and with other brands as well. You have, no visibility or no direct lines of communication into your factory partner. And there's just so many ways in which that can snowball into huge problems. And so, for us, it's really important that you have a direct line of communication, direct line of sight into what's going on with the actual partner that is producing your finished goods, and not working through a middleman. And that was actually, even though we come in as a supply chain partner, that is inherent or baked into how we operate, is like making sure we're setting up those direct lines, because it is so critical for the long-term success of your business and relationship. So I think that ultimately that would be a non-starter for me. And if anybody is advising you otherwise, I would happy to jump in and give you 10 reasons why you shouldn't be working with a trading company.
And any thoughts here?
Yeah, we definitely prefer factory direct relationships, but there are circumstances where we found trading companies to be helpful. I agree. I think the quality varies so significantly from one agency to another. The reasons why we do it are that a trading company can provide scale for us at a factory. If we go factory direct with a really large operation, but with a small program out of the gate, sometimes it can be difficult to even get in the door. And the trading company, because they may be working with this manufacturer with multiple customers, they have the scale that can get us access to the factory. The other thing that a trading company can provide, a good one, is infrastructure on the ground. Development horsepower in country, material sourcing in country, quality inspectors in the facility, help with freight and logistics, some of the things that can be beneficial, particularly for a team that is stretched too thin or for a team that just doesn't have those resources. So it's pretty opportunistic for us. And whenever we do work with a trading company, we visit all of the production facilities ourselves. So we don't take their word on anything. We actually say, what are the facilities that will be making our product? And we want to see those. One word of caution, a trading company typically is going to charge some sort of a fee structure on top of product costs. Ideally, you want that broken out and charged separately so you don't pay import tariffs on their fees. The other piece that I would encourage folks to consider is, that's the main one. That's the main one. So just be thoughtful in terms of how fees are structured.
Play it back. It sounds like you both are saying, hey, you could use it, but if you do, buyer beware, and make sure you're seeing the factory and you know what you're going into. Which is sage advice. Boots on the ground, see everything at all times. This will be my last question. For both of you, and then maybe you can take the lead. What systems do you need to scale once you've launched your product? What do you put in place at Sens?
Well, we are implementing Anvyl. Not prompted by Rodney for me to say that, but it's
I appreciate that.
It's been critical for us because as our business has grown, the frequency of purchase orders and just the frequency of communication with our suppliers has become overwhelming for the team. And Anvyl has created a lot of efficiency in that area of the business. The other thing that's worked really well for us is we have a boutique consultancy based in Taiwan that provides us with quality and supply chain services. And the boutique piece of that is important because it's been a single relationship now for about 6 years. The company has inspectors on the ground in all of the countries where we operate, and it's been a really stable team. So we have the same person inspecting the same product at the same facilities, order after order, so they know our product, they know our people, and I think we get a much higher level of service as a result of that. Sims is not at the point where we have the scale to have our own dedicated presence in Asia, but this partner has truly become effectively the Sims office on the ground, and that's been invaluable for us.
Got it. With the quality, can you share who it is, or is that for quality aspects? There's a few.
I would suggest that if people are specifically curious about it, to reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to talk. They're not necessarily going to be a good fit for everybody. They're a perfect fit for us. So yeah.
For anyone, Quima is a major one that has global presence. They've rebranded their name. I can't remember the old name, but they're one that's you could use as well for global. Justin, any thoughts on systems, processes? I'm going to also ask about timing around an ERP potentially, or even inventory management, if you two have thoughts with that, just to build on this question.
Yeah, so in terms of systems, we are currently using Anvyl across all of our programs, which is incredibly invaluable for us in terms of just tracking and managing all of our purchase orders that we issue and the history behind that. So that is, for us, that's been an invaluable part of how we've been able to scale across a lot of different programs on the back end. It's also really important to make sure that from like an item setup perspective, there is a source of truth around inventory items, whether that is Anvyl or in some instances, some brand partners are using other platforms, but it is very important to make sure that there is some kind of source of truth that can be shared and used for item creation and management. And then post production, I think the prompt around an ERP system is a good one. We're working with a ton of early stage companies, and I think at a certain point, you'll hit kind of the graduation threshold of wanting to bring something, onboard a platform or a system to kind of act in that regard. We see that from some of our brand partners, and I think it really depends on what you want to get out or what you need from, I guess, your distribution or retail perspective. In some instances, the brands that we're working with have an omni-channel strategy, and they've got multiple kind of warehouse locations, and so bringing on a solution that can handle all of that is going to be important. In other instances, they're really looking for something that basically they can use to reconcile all of the financial aspects to PO creation against what actually ships and when. And so something kind of lighter weight might be more appropriate. But it really depends, I think, on the needs of the business and then the phase of where you are. And I think we've seen for a lot of the brands we work with, it doesn't happen necessarily in the first 12 months that you need to onboard an ERP solution. But it's something that you should be mindful of, beyond that.
Yeah. Very expensive and very time consuming. So you have to be ready for both of those things if you're going to put in an ERP.
Yeah, it requires a dedicated hire to manage the process and own that for sure.
Yep. Gennady asked a question, and this is a good one, and it's timely. If there's a key component that you have and one that's not easily substituted, and an example here is like chips, the chip shortages. How do you avoid supply chain issues with those key products? What strategies do you take?
Yeah, that's a really good prompt. We're dealing with it on multiple programs. And in some instances, there's still uncertainty, or there's an aspect of kind of getting somewhat blindsided. And, a good answer for that is we had conversations with a lot of brands that had these critical components, as part of the BOM, as part of their bill of materials, and just flagged coming out of Chinese New Year that, there was talks on the horizon that you should start stocking up on certain components. So that we did that for certain things that we were aware of, but that definitely did not address a lot of things that we're now dealing with today. And the way we're reacting is, obviously trying to appeal to any means of distribution partners that may have access to the components. But we're also using our design capabilities to basically explore what are alternative components that we can use as a stopgap measure, if it's appropriate. And in some instances, that is, unfortunately, that's what's happening, is we're essentially redesigning some boards to accommodate alternative chips. I don't think that there's a silver bullet right answer to that prompt. And I think there's a lot of people who are learning things today, meaning right now with what's going on, that maybe there will be some interesting innovations or strategies that people can employ in the near future.
The only thing I'd add to that, we don't use electronics or chips in our product, but we do have some critical ingredients, and we also have just critical finished goods suppliers for our brand. What has worked well for us is really a strong commitment to long-range capacity planning. So making sure that our partners always have visibility roughly 8 to 12 months out beyond the actual production window, and getting actual confirmations back from them that they've received our capacity plan, that the capacity has been allocated, and that capacity need has been communicated to raw material suppliers in those situations where we're not managing that communication ourselves. We've still had instances very recently where folks have come back and said, hey, can't accept any more purchase orders for 2021. We're totally booked out, or we can't get raw materials. I can engage with them from a stronger position when I know that they have received capacity planning and confirmed capacity planning, because they made a black and white commitment to SIMS. And I think that helps in getting priority, because there are very few instances for us where there simply is zero capacity. It's just less than they had planned. And so they're having to make choices. And it's just a battle to get to the top of that priority stack. And I think that planning, forecasting can be very, very helpful there.
Yeah, a few things. Obviously, you can plan for the capacity. You can buy capacity. You can try to increase your safety stock if you can see the future, which is obviously very, very hard. But that's a very tough one in general for anybody. And companies, I mean, the biggest companies in the world are struggling to find chips. So what does that tell you? If you're a startup, it's going to be difficult if someone chooses not to support you. Sterling, I know you have a question. I'm going to reach out to you directly on it, just because it's not a clear-cut answer, the best solution. There's many there for inventory management. But to wrap this up, I'll just ask one question for both of you. Any war stories, any best practice, anything you want to leave everyone with?
Man, I think there's a lot. There's a lot of PTSD kind of flashing over me, especially over the last year. I guess I can give some anecdotes on a program of late, where, I think one big thing, or one kind of sage word of advice for anyone who's just starting out, is just to make sure that you are buffering in a lot of extra time and money at the moment to deal with supply chain setup and new product introduction at scale. We are definitely in a very strange and unprecedented time in regards to all things supply chain and yeah, all things on the supply chain front. I think, a recent anecdote that we've been dealing with is with a factory. Actually, I think that's probably not a good anecdote. I gotta think about it for a second. Ben, do you have a good anecdote to share while I think about it?
Yeah, you bet. Well, I agree with you. Right now is particularly challenging for supply chain leaders. It's it's like a game of whack-a-mole. You whack one down, and then it just pops up somewhere else. Gore-Tex deliveries were challenging. Now you can't get high quality aluminum anywhere in Asia. It's just this constant battle. One of the ones that really sticks with me in terms of war stories is right when I became responsible for sourcing here at SIMS, we had a delivery of knit sort of sun protective shirts out of Central America, and the neck opening was 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches too small. And the product looked great otherwise, but somebody would try to squeeze that thing over their heads, and it simply was just not built to spec. And it was massive units for us. And so I was kind of thrown right into the fire on that. And it was an interesting learning opportunity for me, because we had payment terms in place with our supplier. And so there was a lot of inventory that had been built incorrectly that we hadn't paid for. And of course, the manufacturer was already out all of the costs of the raw materials and the labor of building that. So there was a lot of incentive for them to find a solution. And in the process of kind of doing the exploratory work, they admitted that they had changed the cut pattern on us without our approval. And that, of course, is a big no-no in apparel manufacturing. So they effectively brought fault on themselves. We had sort of all reason to assume that they would cover all of the expenses and really kind of make us whole for the issue. Where this gets complicated is that this was one of our most critical programs. What we really needed, we needed correctly built product back in our warehouse and out to our retailers as quickly as possible. So we needed to hold them accountable for the mistake they made, but we also needed to keep them at the table so they would make more product, make it correctly, and get it to us quickly. So it was a total balance between really dropping the hammer on them, but still being willing to compromise and just sort of strategic enough that they still wanted to produce more product for us. But we at the same time had to laugh. We had a bunch of people downstairs in our warehouse, and we were all trying to squeeze these shirts on over our heads. Is that one too small for your head? Looking around the table, and so there's always levity in these moments, but the negotiations, the need for compromise when you have a big quality issue like that is pretty fascinating.
Cool. It's great. Justin, do you have anything?
Yeah, I want to just be mindful of I guess disclosing the right details, but it's in the same vein where you're going to run into quality issues, and we do everything that we can to make sure that we're covering ourselves up front before anything leaves the factory. And so making sure that you undergo robust reliability tests during development, and then pre-shipment inspections with robust quality control plans in place, and what gets inspected before goods get on a vessel is really important. All that being said, is especially with new products, there's always going to be learnings once the product is in the field, in the wild, and being interacted with people in different ways than you might not have expected. So we've had an instances where that's happened, and I guess most recently with a product that had a foam component that changed over the course of different environmental conditions and time, that we then had to deal with foam being denatured once it's in the hands of consumers, that we had to go back and figure out what the root cause was, what the solution was, who's going to be responsible for it. These are all big conversations, and I think, to Ben's point, making sure that you've got really strong partnerships in place with all of your service partners and manufacturing partners is really important and critical for that. Otherwise, it's going to be a thorny mess to kind of get yourself out of. And part of that is making sure that you're providing visibility into what's down the pike and coming in as a real partner, so that when things go sideways, you can have conversations about partners being accountable and supporting each other and sharing the burden when that needs to happen. So that was something that we had to navigate with this foam product, and I can proudly say that we figured out a path forward where not everybody was getting thrown to the wolves.
Just to wrap up, Ben, Justin, I really appreciate your time here, and thank you for your wisdom and advice. You both have obviously continued to do amazing things, and I really appreciate it. And then if anyone wants to reach out to Ben, Justin, to further conversation, please do. We pass up their info, and if you have any questions on Anvyl, we're happy to share as well. So thank you very much. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks all. Thanks, Rodney. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thank you guys.